Every nigga everywhere I go, man. Juicy J, shut the fuck up!
Yeah, spin that shit.
Memphis nigga everywhere I Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
Every nigga everywhere I go.
Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
Every nigga everywhere I go.
Eyes all red like city gear. Nigga. Draw down on him, make a fuck nigga, give it here. Jeff #1, I'm the rookie of the year. Wanna see a mad street, make a nigga disappear. Real Memphis nigga when I'm looking in the mirror. Yo,
Memphis nigga everywhere I go, this the remix.
Ay.
Memphis nigga going up like the G-Mix.
Ay. Everybody outside, it's the freak nigga. Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
Fuck nigga, Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
Let's get it.
Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
Let's get it.
Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
Let's get it.
Memphis nigga everywhere I big head that hoe. Memphis shit, that's how I feel. Shit might check me a hoe, might flame me a hoe. Spit a little game on a hoe. Never spent change on a hoe. Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
He ain't even been to the city before. Fuck nigga. He ain't even been to the city. He ain't even been to the city before. Let's get it. Nigga came once, but he can't come back no more. These Memphis nigga wanna drop my low. Yo, nigga want smoke, let's go. Yo, bitch want smoke, fuck nigga, I call Big Glow. Yo,
Memphis bitch everywhere I go. Okay. Memphis bitch everywhere I let's get. Memphis bitch everywhere I go. Okay. Memphis bitch everywhere I on the count. Memphis bitch everywhere I go. Might take a bitch nigga, might take a nigga home. Riding down Fraser be coolin'. With some hot boys still doing donuts in the smoke. Getting money ass bitch, that's me. That's me. Tomato fruit M's and I still want more. Now if Memphis bitch got hard. Win, lose, or draw, bitch, I still want smoke. I ain't shit but 25. Let's go. Already a legend up in my city. Bump down, bump 3-6. Hey, man, play me some of that pimpin'. Gangsta ass bitch, stay muggin'. Everywhere I go, I'm thuggin'. Memphis bitch, everywhere I go. Let's go. And everywhere I go, they love me.
Yeah, Memphis nigga everywhere I step through. 3-6 Mafia and Gangsta Boo. You know what it is, my nigga. My city full of gorillas that ain't from the zoo. North Memphis nigga so infamous. Rest in peace, Lord Infamous. Old school nigga with the pole in the cut. I hear making easy money tryna pimp a slut. Fraser Boulevard in a car all candy. South Memphis bitch, she ain't wearing no panties. She ain't never been nowhere outside our city. I'm a draper in Dior and I'ma take it to the graves. Memphis nigga everywhere I step on the scene. Ride through Evergreen, blow and get it green. Give a little bad bitch a hug. With all this water on me, she gon' have a wet dream. You don't know nothing about Hyde Park. You don't really wanna stop by after dark. Even Nick K's know the city I'm reppin'. Have a nigga scat pack go to 60 seconds. 20 years plus I'd have been in this thing. And a nigga like me ain't never gon' change. Rollin' up dope while I'm sitting so close. I can walk on the floor at the Grizzly game.
I want EP and chicken and dogs. You wanna receive under the heart. I'm with Lil P and I'm motherfucking pot. I be like Cheeky, we say squad. Nigga there.
Ayy, Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Get 100 bread a piece when I'm in the stove. Parkway Village, I'm a native. Still had a duck posted up in the Dover. Young nigga wanna be like Craig Pettis, bro wanna be G-Train. Afghanistan top tier, tell Biden send us to Ukraine. Drake made sure we try global. Let me tell you about Poplar. We'll stop and deals go for a couple bucks, she'll take it so. East Memphis, that's in that league. North Memphis, that's got it. South Memphis, long live flipper. West Memphis, that ain't Memphis. On EP, eating chicken at Dodge before a nigga went vegan. Might get his 6P from Crumpets. All done left, it's the best jack. Is she from Memphis with a bunny on? She give more head than a lace front. Me go my partner from back in the day, but I heard he hit him a lace blunt. Tell white folks he my nigga. Hey Max Snoop, I got a beer for you. From a city where you win it, they don't even really wanna even cheer for you. Deep down they be hating on you, but too quick to say I love you. In Memphis it's a red flag if she ain't blood and she say brother. Everybody gotta switch in this bitch. Game be beefing with clicks. Tell DJ yo where the dream ball at. I'm tryna stomp some shit. 2016 at the Delta Fair in the corn maze, you could die there. Long live J Money Truler, when he died, whole city had tears. Memphis nigga everywhere I go. I don't care if it was Idaho. Before Ja, it was Mike Cullen. Before Jaren, it was Z-Bo. In the lead, don't get his credit, but I'm really hometown hero. Might use a key to the city just to lock my back door. Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Oh, Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Oh, Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Oh, Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Memphis nigga everywhere I go. Oh, Memphis nigga everywhere. Memphis nigga everywhere I go.
We'll try to take a few questions.
Goodness, quality screen sharing to the limit on 360. I like to normally have the resolution down, but I felt, well, I didn't feel, well, yeah, I felt the need to kind of revisit this whole Tyre Nichols thing. And point out how I just don't understand some people's stuff out here. Like, I think we can all agree if the federal government charges you with something, their time is stiffer, they got better resources and all of that stuff. So getting a guilty conviction on the federal level would be a win because they're gonna have to do more time. Well, it may however many years it is, they gotta serve like at least 85% of the time. Sometimes some people still say 100% of the time, but 85 to 100, you gotta serve it. We all can agree that federal laws and stuff trump state laws. And one of the reasons I said that they overcharged in this case at the state level is because the feds didn't even charge them with the shit that the state tried. And the feds have more resources. They're better suited for shit of that nature. They didn't charge them with first-degree murder and kidnapping and things of that nature. So we're going to listen to what they were charged with, and then we're going to watch everything they were found guilty of and not guilty of. Because they were found not guilty of some shit in the Fed trial, but they also were found guilty of stuff. So we're going back to a year ago when the feds announced charges for them.
We'll try to take a few questions. First, I want to introduce the three people who have joined me today for this announcement. Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark of the Civil Rights Division, Special Agent in Charge Doug DePodesta of the Memphis FBI Field Office, and First Assistant United States Attorney Reagan Pondra. Almost 8 months ago, I stood at this podium to announce that our office, together with the Civil Rights Division, had opened a criminal civil rights investigation into the circumstances leading to the tragic death of Tyre Nichols. I said that the investigation would be thorough and methodical, and that, as with any other investigation, we would go where the facts led us. That day, I also made a point to say that we care deeply about potential violations of constitutional rights here in my hometown. And I told the citizens of Memphis that I want this city to be a place where justice is done. To do justice, we must ensure that everyone's civil rights are protected. Earlier this afternoon, a federal grand jury returned an indictment charging 5 former Memphis police officers.
I mean, part of the judicial process is them being charged. They were charged federally and statewide. So they went through the judicial process
with obstruction of justice.
That's justice.
The 5 defendants are Emmett Martin III.
If they were never charged,
Bean,
I would see people like, what the fuck?
Desmond Mills Jr.,
but they actually had to be arrested, bond
in a
out,
moment,
and
I
things
will
of that
discuss
nature.
the specific charges against the defendants, but first, I would like to invite Assistant Attorney General Clark to the podium.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Ritz, and good afternoon. I'm Kristen Clark, and I lead the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. The Justice Department has brought federal civil rights criminal charges against 5 former Memphis Police Department detectives involved in the tragic death of Tyre Nichols. The charges allege that 5 former Scorpion team detectives used excessive force, resulting in the death of Mr. Nichols, that they aided and abetted each other in using that excessive force, and that they failed to intervene to stop that excessive force. We also allege that after they used excessive force on Mr. Nichols, the detectives failed to render medical aid or to advise the dispatcher and emergency medical personnel of Mr. Nichols' serious medical needs, even as his condition deteriorated and as he became unresponsive. As time passed at the arrest scene, the defendants discussed striking Mr. Nichols, hitting him with straight haymakers and taking turns hitting him, information that they failed to tell EMTs and paramedics. We also charge all 5 detectives with conspiring to and taking overt action to cover up their misconduct. As Americans, our Constitution gives us certain basic rights when we interact with law enforcement officers. We have a right to be free from unreasonable force, a right to have other officers intervene to stop the unlawful assault, and a right, when in police custody, to have urgent medical needs appropriately addressed and not met with deliberate indifference. These rights define a standard of conduct that police officers must meet, a standard that we enforce across the country at the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Enforcing that standard is one of our highest priorities for two reasons. First, our obligation to protect people's constitutional rights, and second, our mission to ensure effective policing in our communities. Effective policing requires public trust. We all know that police officers have challenging jobs and that most officers carry out their jobs with honesty, dedication, and integrity. But when some officers violate the Constitution, when they use excessive force, when they ignore serious injuries inflicted on people they arrest, their actions erode the public's trust. At the Civil Rights Division, one of our highest priorities is to ensure law enforcement accountability and to preserve and restore the public's faith in law enforcement. The statistics speak for themselves. Since January of 2021, the Justice Department has brought more than 100 prosecutions involving violations of constitutional and legal rights. In that same period, we obtained more than 86 convictions. We will never stop working to fulfill our duty to protect Americans from unlawful acts of police violence. We will work to hold offenders accountable because in our country, no one is above the law. I pledge to you, as Attorney General Garland often says, that we will follow the facts and the law, and we will seek to ensure that our system of justice lives up to its name. Note that the charges announced today are separate from the Justice Department's civil pattern or practice investigation into the Memphis Police Department opened this past July. The charges announced today are criminal, while the pattern or practice investigation is a civil matter that will be conducted separately and independently from the criminal case. Earlier today, I sat down with Tyre Nichols' mother and father to convey my sympathy for their loss. I extend my deepest condolences to Tyre's family and to all of those who knew him and loved him. It is tragic to see a life cut short at 29 with so many milestones unmet, so many words unsaid, and so much potential unfulfilled. Tyre Nichols should be alive today. No one in this country should have to bury a loved one because of police violence. The Justice Department will never stop working to fulfill our duty to protect the American people from excessive and unlawful use of force by officials acting under color of law. Since this tragic incident occurred, the Civil Rights Division has been working alongside prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office, as well as FBI agents here in Memphis. And I want to thank this team for working so hard in investigating this case and guiding it through our system of justice. I'll note that the defendants are presumed innocent under our law, and now the federal criminal process will take its course. I now turn the podium back over to U.S. Attorney Ritz, who will describe the indictment in further detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Attorney General Clark. I want to go through the specifics of the charges. The indictment charges defendants in 4 counts. First, the indictment alleges that the defendants assaulted Ms. Nichols intervene in the unlawful assault. By doing so, they deprived. Second, the indictment alleges that the defendants knew that Mr. Nichols, who was an arrestee in police custody, had a serious medical need, and that they disregarded that medical need by failing to render medical aid and by failing to advise the police dispatcher and emergency medical personnel of the circumstances. By doing so, the defendants deprived Mr. Nichols of the right to be free from a police officer's deliberate indifference to an arrestee's serious medical needs. Third, the indictment alleges that the defendants intentionally conspired to withhold and omit material information and to make false and misleading statements in an effort to cover up the use of unreasonable force on Mr. Nichols. The indictment lists several overt acts in furtherance of this conspiracy, including that the defendants did not tell the MPD dispatcher, an MPD supervisor, Memphis Fire Department EMTs, or Memphis Fire Department paramedics that they knew Mr. Nichols had been struck repeatedly, that the defendants used their body-worn cameras in such a way as to limit the capture of evidence at the arrest scene, and that the defendants provided false and misleading information about the arrest scene for the official incident report. Finally, the indictment alleges that the defendants obstructed justice by providing false and misleading information and withholding material information in their communications with a police supervisor and a police detective, both of whom were tasked with writing reports on the arrest of Tyre Nichols. As the Assistant Attorney General said, these charges, of course, as with any criminal case, the indictment contains allegations only, and defendants are presumed innocent until proven guilty. I want to say that the first two counts alleging civil rights violations resulting in death carry a sentence of up to life in prison, and the other two counts, the obstruction of justice counts, carry a potential prison sentence of up to 20 years in prison. I also want to say thank you to the dedicated team of prosecutors and law enforcement agents who are working on this case. This case is being handled by my office's newly formed National Security and Civil Rights Unit, working hand in hand with the Civil Rights Division. I'm proud of our team and proud of their commitment to protecting the civil rights of all Americans. Now we are able to take just a few questions.
Do you anticipate further charges?
At this time, we would not comment on the existence or status of any criminal investigation. We are here to announce that the 5 defendants that we've charged today have been charged in this indictment.
Bria Jones, News Channel 3. Can you explain the weight that these charges have over the current criminal charges here in Shelby County and how this could impact the ongoing legal proceedings here?
Yes, these would be handled in separate two systems. So the charges would be handled in state court, charges here in federal court, and the state court and the state system over there would set the trial date and things like that. Over here in the federal system, the same thing would happen, and we're not going to make any predictions today about how that timeline might emerge.
So we're seeing that the DOJ is already conducting these interviews with people in the Memphis community about their merge
over there, and the state court and the state system over there would set the trial date and things like that. Over here in the federal system, the same thing would happen, and we're not going to make any predictions today about how that timeline might emerge.
So we're seeing that the DOJ is already conducting these interviews with people in the Memphis community about their experience with the Scorpion Unit and MPD. Did that contribute to these charges at all, or is that separate from the pattern of practice?
The Justice Department is actively conducting community meetings and gathering information in the course of carrying out its civil pattern or practice investigation into the Memphis Police Department. We look forward to continuing to hear from the community as that investigation takes its course, but we will underscore that that is a separate investigation from the criminal charges that we're announcing today.
Final question.
Do you expect a hearing tomorrow or very soon?
In Mr. Saines, I believe in the federal case, we expect that the defendants would be making their initial appearance in the coming days. Thank you all for being here.
All right, there we have it. The news conference by Kevin G. Ritz, the United States Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, and Kristen Clark, who oversees the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice, an important player and assistant attorney general to Merrick Garland, who is the Attorney General of the United States. Merrick Garland had a statement about this case today. We're going to have that for you momentarily, but first we want to have some comments from defense attorneys, beginning with Mills, and I believe we have his quote ready for us here. Yes, there it is. We have been expecting this federal indictment, Blake Balance says of this news conference today, and it does not change Mr. Mills' position. As in the state case, Mr. Mills maintains his innocence. He will turn himself in on the federal indictment and continue to defend himself against all allegations in both the state and federal court systems. And also, we have a statement from Bill Massey, who's a prominent, says, quote, Emmett Martin, of course, being one of the former officers involved in the Tyre Nichols case. I and my team will be representing Emmett Martin in the federal indictment. We have been expecting it, and we are ready to move forward. And now we have with us Memphis defense attorney Michael Working, who joins us now with a breakdown of today's indictment and the charges against all the five former officers. Mr. Working, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and
Sure.
being
here coming up in just a moment. She's the one listening to all this. And as far as Bean goes, I mean, it was the defense who laid out a pretty compelling case that Officer Bean was not compliant with a lot of this, even though he did fall under the obstruction of justice guilty verdict. John Keith Perry talking on behalf of Tadarius Bean, the testimony of the former Scorpion Unit officer, most referred to him as quiet, and that Bean was the newest member of the team.
Okay. We are now learning the other former Memphis police officer, Demetrius Haley, has been found guilty on count 3.
I don't know if
and
y'all,
4.
hold on.
Count
let me-
3 is
let me
conspiracy
pause this.
to witness.
I don't know if y'all listened to that white man in the federal that read the indictment where he said just a simple charge of obstruction comes with 20 years in the federal system. That's more time. If any of them got convicted of obstruction, they could be facing up to 20 years. It's more time than they would have gotten with second-degree murder in the federal system.
Tamper. Count 4 is obstruction of justice. Again, Demetrius Haley found guilty on 2 counts. And 4 conspiracy to witness tamper and obstruction of justice, which means that he was found not guilty at this point on excessive force and failure to intervene and deliberate indifference. So at this point, we are still waiting on the third suspect, which at this point is Justin Smith.
Justin Smith. So again, to repeat, guilty on obstruction of justice, guilty on the conspiracy to obstruct justice. Of course, that conspiracy charge kind of creates a larger umbrella. That means that the officers conspired with each other in this case to talk about the case on the scene. And a lot of that played out on body cam video. You saw that. You saw those officers talking to each other and seeming, we're not litigating this case here on the air, but they seem to begin constructing their own narrative as opposed to exactly what was played out there on the videotape. That body cam and the tower cam of the beating of Tyre Nichols. Of course, that beating happened back on January 7th. It was a Saturday night in 2023.
We're also learning that Demetrius Haley, again, we said he was guilty on the 2 counts, conspiracy to witness tamper and obstruction of justice, which was count 4. But we're learning that he was found guilty of 2 lesser charges, deprivation of rights and bodily injury. Again, we're still waiting on anything that's coming down for Justin Smith. He is the suspect.
We just got word just a second ago.
Haley
Justin
is
Smith,
one of the 3 that was
guilty
acquitted
only
yesterday.
Of count
But not in
4,
federal court.
obstruction
Facing
of
20
justice,
years on
meaning
one of them
the civil rights
obstruction charges.
violations, the unreasonable force use and deliberate indifference, not guilty on that charge, as well as not guilty on conspiracy charges. So Justin Smith, former officer Justin Smith, found only on count 4 obstruction of justice charge.
Again, this 5 and Desmond Mills, Smith, Darius Bean, and Demetrius Haley, Martin, and Desmond Mills, they pleaded guilty here, in fact.
They did, and they actually were quite detrimental to the defense in this case because they in turn testified on behalf of the prosecution against Bean, Haley, and Smith. Of course, this is wrapping up almost 4 full weeks in the courtroom.
Former Memphis police officers Emmett Martin, Desmond Mills, Justin Smith, Darius Bean, and Demetrius Haley. We know that Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills, they pleaded guilty early on this year, in fact.
They did, and they actually were quite detrimental to the defense in this case because they in turn testified on behalf of the prosecution against Bean, Haley, and Smith. Of course, this is wrapping up almost 4 full weeks in the courtroom for those jurors. Of course, for
2 of them pled guilty in federal court. So all 5 of them were convicted in federal court. Now, one of the 2 that pled guilty in federal court, one of them still has to be tried in state court, and the other one, he also pled guilty in the state trial system too. So I don't understand why people are saying there was no justice done. I guess they forgot about this part. The guilty pleas on a state level for one of the officers in the Tyre case, and the other one still has to. The 2 that are most culpable for his death, if they said, one has to be tried still, the other one already pled guilty and is awaiting sentencing.
Judge Mark Norris, who's presided over this, and the attorneys, 3 sets of defense attorneys, and of course the prosecution on behalf of the Department of Justice. Interesting to say the least. These verdicts that are coming down. I dare say this is not exactly what we expected.
It's definitely not what we expected based on the video that MPD released. I believe that was at the end of January where they actually released the video.
It was very shortly after the beating.
Right. Based on the video, many people felt that the actions of the officers were very excessive. But clearly what happened in court today, the jury determined something different.
Well, again, we saw this. You've seen this play out time and time again. It's been available online. And of course, we brought it to you first here, Fox 13, when it was first released. You've seen it. You've been able to pass your own judgment. Part of this goes out to the fact that they brought in force or use of force experts, and many of those, many of the parts of the testimony by that use of force expert pointed to the fact that they did seem to be compliant in some ways
with policy.
With policy, and that's where, you know, if you go back shortly after the Tyre Nichols beating and after his death, there were many calls for a complete investigation. Matter of fact, there has been a complete investigation into the Memphis Police Department, the Scorpion Unit, that all 5 members of that particular team were members of the Scorpion Unit. That has since been disbanded. That's now no longer part of the arsenal, if you will, of the MPD. So a lot has happened since January 7th of 2023. But again, so far, only obstruction of justice and conspiracy to obstruct justice charges against these individuals. Of course, we don't know the sentencing yet. That's yet to happen. That's going to be handed down by Judge Mark Norris,
which carried, I believe, up to 20 years.
We're waiting at this point.
There we go. Here are the maximum penalties. That's what we were going to go to there. For the unreasonable force, the deliberate indifference, life in prison was possible. Now, again, just because the life in prison sentences are off the table here, that does not mean that these officers are not facing significant prison time. Because as you see on the screen, the conspiracy to obstruct justice carries a maximum of 20 years. The obstruction charge itself also carries a maximum of 20 years. It'll be interesting on the two that were found on Bean and Haley. Both of those were found guilty on both of those bottom counts. If those particular sentences will be one concurrent, or if they will be separate sentences. If so, that could be up to 40 years for each officer as a maximum.
Mind you, this is the state case. This is the federal case. They're still facing state charges as well, which I believe is
And
second-degree
again,
murder for that.
I just want to
So
point
there's still
out
some
the
other charges
feds
that they're
have
facing
better
that's coming down the
resources. The
pipeline
feds
here.
didn't
That
even
state trial
charge
is
them
set to
with
begin
murder.
sometime early next year.
They
They
took
wanted to wait
over
until
the
this federal
case,
trial wrapped up and
reviewed
give
it first,
the defense
and
attorneys and,
then
of course,
the
the
state
prosecution
was
on behalf
able
of
to
Shelby
kind of
County
follow
time
their
to
blueprint, and they
vet all the
overcharged
outcome
them.
of this, get this tidied away, and then move into that state court. Right after that, you'll see the third civil trial, and that third civil trial will not begin until sometime. They're predicting sometime early next year. That will be after the state trial as well. That's where the family of Tyre Nichols is seeking $550 million in damages against not only the city of Memphis, but also other individuals named in that case, including the 5 officers.
Again, we're talking about 3 officers tonight: Justin Smith, Tadarius Bean, and Demetrius Haley. We know that Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills, they have already pled guilty, but these are the other 3 officers that are tied to the Tyre Nichols beating. Just for clarification for you tonight, Tadarius Bean, guilty on count 4, which was obstruction of justice. Demetrius Haley, guilty on counts 3 and 4, which is still obstruction of justice, but witness tampering was tied in that as well. Haley was also found guilty of and bodily injury. The last suspect was Justin Smith, found guilty on count 4, again, obstruction of justice. And we noted that that could be up to 20 years in prison for that.
20 years for both of those counts, in fact. Civil rights violations, the unreasonable force violations, the deliberate indifference charges, found not guilty. All 3 officers found not guilty on all of those charges. So again, life in prison regarding the federal case, off the table for all 3. It's going to be a minute. I'm not exactly sure the timetable. We've got reporters in the newsroom, or not in the newsroom, but in the courtroom, I should say, that should be able to give us a little more information on exactly how long it's going to take before we see sentencing in this particular trial.
Mind you, all of this started on January 7th of 2023. It started that evening. In fact, where Tyre Nichols was pulled over, I believe it was in Hickory Hill.
It was.
And everything ensued.
Rains and Ross Road.
Yes, and he was only a block or 2 away from his home.
And only a block or two from the Rains MPD station.
Precinct.
All right, let's go to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She has been covering this case since day one. Again, we're wrapping up almost 4 full weeks in a federal courtroom. Kayla, what can you tell us?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, that this verdict came down much sooner than we were all expecting. It took about 6 hours for the jury to reach the verdict. 3 defendants were found guilty of the conspiracy obstruction of justice charge, that count 4, and not guilty of the other charges instead. Now, we do know that one defendant, Demetrius Haley, was found guilty of both obstruction charges and the lesser charges when it comes to the unreasonable force. So at this point, what we're waiting for is to see exactly how the family is going to react, how the defense attorneys are going to react, and the prosecutors in this case. It has been a very long trial, almost exactly 4 weeks. It took 19 days to get to the point that we are at now. So at this point, we're waiting any moment for the family to come down, prosecutors to come down. We know that the verdict is being, family was stoked in the courtroom. They did not have a reaction. They kept a straight face throughout this entire thing. The same throughout the entire trial, just as someone making observations within the courtroom. But again, these 3 defendants are guilty of the obstruction of justice charge, not guilty as charged for unreasonable force. But Demetrius Haley is guilty of lesser charges of causing bodily injury. So again, at this point, just waiting for the family and everyone else to come outside.
Kayla, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but I would think that the prosecution has to be a little taken aback by this, given the case they laid out, plus the video that we've seen so many times, time and time again. But also, we can't get lost in the fact that these 2 charges, the obstruction of justice and the conspiracy to obstruct justice, those still carry significant prison time. So we're not, these officers are not getting off free.
Yeah, that's right. It's up to 20 years for each of those charges. But while the verdict was being read, you could see the look of surprise on the prosecutor's face, probably a little bit of disappointment as well. We did see one prosecutor, his face turned red while the verdict was being read by the judge. And he went through juror by juror and polled them to make sure that this was in fact a unanimous decision. And all of their answers were yes.
Kayla, curious. We have seen the video and the extent of it. We've also seen all of the pictures of Tyre Nichols while he was in the hospital. I believe that the defense made it very clear that these officers felt as if Tyre Nichols was a dangerous suspect, as if he was trying to get away, as if he was being combative. Did any of that play with the jury? Did you see anything on their faces that would make them think, well, maybe?
I know it was difficult at some point for jurors to watch the videos. We did see just from where we were sitting that one of the jurors ended up covering his ears, especially in parts of the video where you could hear Tyre calling for his mother on that body camera video. So you could see some of them did have reactions to the videos. But again, at this point, it looks like it didn't affect their decision much.
Okay, that is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. She has been there again from the beginning of this court case. All of this started, of course, January 7th of last year. Kayla has been on this case since it first started. She's been in the courtroom, in fact, for the last 19 days on this case.
Kayla, do you expect today or do you know?
Yeah, I know this morning they did do a prayer circle, but they didn't indicate whether or not they were planning to speak after a verdict. So at this point, like I said, we're just waiting for them to come down and see if we can get them to comment at all on this case. I know their attorney, Ben Crump, we have not seen him today. We also haven't seen Antonio Romanucci. So their team of attorneys is not here, but we do know the family is here and they were in the courtroom.
Very good. Again, Kayla, stand by. We'll be joining you again in a moment. Here we are, 10 minutes, almost 11 minutes after 5 o'clock. Keep in mind, the jury was handed this case, as Kayla pointed out, just before 11 a.m. It took them almost a couple of hours this morning for Judge Mark Norris to read instructions to the jury, because there's a long procedural process in reading those instructions. It's not just go deliberate. So that happened. They were able to get the case, went back into the room, deliberated from 11 until about 4:15. That's when we found out that they had a verdict in this case. And typically, as Darcy and I were discussing, we were discussing in the newsroom earlier, typically the more quickly you get a verdict read,
You think that it's going to be.
the worse it is for the defendants. But here we are 5 hours in, and to reset the charges, to reset the verdict, I should say, in the death of Tyre Nichols. Again, this is the federal trial. This is not the murder trial. This is in the violation of civil rights and the obstruction of justice trial, if you will, to Darius Bean, former officer. Deliberate indifference, not guilty. Conspiracy to obstruct, not guilty. Obstruction of justice, guilty. That carries a 20-year term.
We also have Demetrius Haley. Unreasonable force, guilty. Deprivation of rights, guilty. Conspiracy to obstruct, guilty. And obstruction of justice, guilty. The conspiracy to obstruct and obstruction of justice. Those are the two charges that are 20 years, that he could face 20 years in prison. The lesser charges, unreasonable force and deprivation of rights. Again, both found guilty on those.
And of course, there were some reduced charges as well for Justin Smith. As we roll to his graphic, unreasonable force, not guilty. Deliberate indifference, also not guilty. Conspiracy to obstruct, not guilty. Obstruction of justice, guilty. And what were the other charges, Darcy?
The two charges for Demetrius Haley, the lesser charges, deprivation of rights.
That was Haley.
But also causing bodily harm.
Gotcha.
Found guilty on those two charges, the lesser charges as well.
So that's where we stand. You just heard Fox 13's Kayla Solomon, who's been in the courtroom since the very beginning, since they began selecting a jury, describe the faces of the defense attorneys. The prosecution, the federal prosecutors. One seemed angry, the other shocked. And I think that I think that there are a lot of people who are going to be shocked at the way this played out. But after 4 weeks, here we are.
Yeah, we're also wondering when they're going to be sentenced. That's one of the things people have been talking about. We're going to toss it back to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon, who joins us. She has been at federal court for the last 19 days. She has been in front of this case, and she brings us more. Kayla, we're trying to find out, do you finally have a sentencing date?
Yes, we do know the sentencing date was set for January of next year. So we know in that time that they will be out just waiting to be sentenced. And that state case is still slated to happen in February. And of course, that state case has to do with a second-degree murder charge. So at this point, we know the sentencing will happen just a few weeks before that state case is set to start.
So that could be at some point in February, if not some point in January, where the state case, where the sentencing will happen for these federal charges.
Kayla, if you would, again, given the fact that you have been there since day one, you've covered this story since day one, January 7th, 2023. And I know it's all still very fresh on your mind. I would like to just get your general impressions of, more specifically, this past week, closing arguments that led us up to this point today. What were your impressions? What were you left with as the jury began their deliberations?
I'll tell you what, we were watching the jurors' faces as closing arguments were happening just to see if anybody had any strong reactions or any reaction at all. And they were difficult to read. They did not give a reaction to any of the defense attorney's arguments, nor did they give any reaction to what prosecutors had to say. But we did hear, of course, each defense attorney had the opportunity to plead their final case to the jury for this. And the jury, they were pretty stoked the entire, they did it. Same things to everyone in the gallery as far as the family members go, as far as community activists who also showed up to attend the trial. Everyone across the board, difficult to read throughout this entire court case. And we finally see today it led all up to this verdict.
I know that the three defendants, none of them have spoken to the media at all. We're talking about Justin Smith, Darius Bean, and of course, Demetrius Haley. But I'm curious if they had a reaction, especially to the count 4 of obstruction of justice, knowing that that's possibly 20 years behind bars. Did they react at all? Because we also know, Kayla, that I believe that Desmond Mills broke down on the stand. So how do these other 3 defendants react?
Yeah, at this point, you couldn't see much of a reaction from them either. It's probably likely they were also told not to give much of a reaction by each of their attorneys, but you could see attorneys were feeling a little relieved as the verdict was read. And of course, in this case where you have the charge of unreasonable force and then the lesser charge of bodily injury, you know, we did see what happened in that case, especially with defendant Haley. At this point, we want to see what defendant Haley's attorney has to say specifically, because he was found guilty of those 2 lesser charges of causing bodily harm, as well as the 2 obstruction of justice charges. So right now, it looks like he's going to be facing the most prison time in this case.
One of the interesting facets of this case, too, Kayla, are the 2 defendants that pled guilty, those 2 other officers, Emmett Martin, Desmond Mills. I mean, there's already been recommendations laid out that Martin should face 40 years in prison, Mills 15 years through the guilty plea. How do you think that's going to play out? I mean, they've yet to be sentenced. I'm assuming that they will be sentenced with this group of 3. Is that correct?
No, so each of them actually has a different sentencing date. So Mills pleaded guilty first. He pleaded guilty just 2 months after these federal charges came down, and he pleaded guilty to 2 of the charges, one for unreasonable force for using his baton and the other for the obstruction of justice and conspiracy. And the recommended time for him was about 15 years. Emmett Martin pleaded guilty just weeks before this trial began, also to 2 of the charges as charged. And his recommendation set by the prosecution was about a 40-year prison sentence. So it'll be interesting to see how much the judge takes into account their testimony, as well as what those recommended sentences will have to do when it comes to sentencing the 3 that did go to trial.
Yeah, very interesting facet of this case. 2 of the 5 pled guilty, and looks like they're all going to face about the same amount of time in prison after all. You would think that the guilty pleas and the idea to cooperate with the prosecution would buy you much less time than the defendants in a case like this. But this time, it did not.
And they're still facing state charges.
There's state charges left to go, second-degree murder charges. I mean, the second-degree murder charge itself, if they're found guilty of that, you're looking at 60 years in prison as a maximum. So there's still as my father used to say, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. There's a long way to go before all of this is actually prosecuted and taken out to the fullest extent of the law. You know what? Let's take a look at the jury breakdown again. 12 people on the jury. There were 3 alternates. I'm sorry, 2 alternates in this case. And this was the breakdown: 4 white men, 3 white women, 4 black women,
I think the feds
2 black men,
get justice.
1 black man, 1 Asian as alternates. So the racial and gender makeup of the jury seems it was agreed upon very quickly. They actually sat this jury much more quickly than they thought they might.
They did.
If you remember,
thought it was going to take some time because they had so many jurors to choose from, but it took just a few days and they had them all seated.
They had a pool of over 200, and in about a day and a half, they went through the voir dire process and had a jury seated and began this trial pretty judiciously.
We all thought that all of the jurors were going to come from Shelby County, but they did not. They came from Lauderdale County, Tipton County, some from Shelby County, but also some from Fayette County as well. So a wide variety of jurors that they had a chance to choose from.
Well, defense attorneys had pressed time and time again to have this case moved. They wanted the federal case moved simply because of the media attention. They pled the case that they could not get a fair trial in Memphis because of the media attention, and that was shot down very, very quickly.
No.
So again, let's recap one more time. As
Imagine
we're now 20 minutes into this broadcast, and we have a verdict. We have 3 verdicts, if you will, in the civil trial.
Offer you
I'm sorry, the federal
45
trial in the
years.
death of
That's
Tyre
still
Nichols
what you
himself.
facing with helping.
It looks like,
hold on one second.
It looks like family is coming out.
With help.
Let's go there live. Let's
facing
listen.
15 with the help.
Have been convicted of something, and they're all going to jail. That's how I feel. This has been a long journey for our family. I'm in shock because I still can't believe all this stuff is going on. We're happy that they've been convicted and they have been arrested.
And the jury, all of them, in some way, and that Tyre Nichols' death won't go unaccounted for. That is critical. We know that this is the federal case. It's different from the state case, but in the federal court, all 5 of them, 2 pled guilty, 3 of them have been found guilty of charges, and they all, as the judge articulated, have been taken into custody. So the family was very relieved that the killers of Tyre Nichols have been taken into custody and have been found guilty. Attorney Tony Ross, as the judge, critical. The state case, but in the federal court, all 5 of them, 2 pled guilty, 3 of them have been found guilty of charges, and they all, as the judge articulated, have been taken into custody. So the family was very relieved that the killers of Tyre Nichols have been taken into custody and have been found guilty. Now you will hear from Attorney Tony Romanucci before any of the other family members may speak.
Thank you, everybody. Today was monumentous because you had 2 defendants who pled guilty to deprivation of rights under color of law.
But we're happy that they all have been convicted.
His mama was cracking up.
The jury found them in some way participated in a crime, and that Tyre Nichols' death won't go unaccounted for. That is critical. We know that this is the federal case. It's different from the state case, but in the federal court, all 5 of them, 2 pled guilty, 3 of them have been found guilty of charges, and they all, as the judge articulated, have been taken into custody. So the family was very relieved that the killers of Tyre Nichols have been taken into custody and have been found guilty. Now you will hear from Attorney Tony Romanucci before any of the other family members may speak.
Thank you, everybody. Today was monumentous because you had 2 defendants who pled guilty to deprivation of rights under color of law. They testified in this courtroom. The remaining defendants have all been found guilty of 1 charge or more: obstruction, conspiracy, deprivation of rights causing bodily injury. This is justice for Tyre. This is a very high burden that this government had in order to prove 12 counts against all of these individuals, and they proved more than half of them.
That's right.
So we are grateful to the federal government. We're grateful to the jury for paying attention, His Honor for a clean trial. And now we look forward to justice. We look forward to the state case, the civil case, because what we know is these officers conspired.
Right.
They made an agreement.
Right.
They made an agreement to cause harm, and now they are in jail. They are.
Man. You're going to hear from Mr. Wells in just a minute. It's very important that we thank Kristen Clark and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice for bringing charges and zealously prosecuting this case. Now
that we're all elated. We're all very, very happy that these guys have been put in jail. This is a long time coming. And justice for Tyre. So we're just so very proud that all of them are going to jail today. We cannot wait on the sentencing, so we know what their total time will be. But today was a very good day for our family.
And now you will hear from Judge Ernestine Doris, who will make a statement for you hear from his uncle.
Today is a day that we, in fact, got justice for Tyre. And I just like to thank the government for their work in getting this done and their diligence and the way that this matter was held and handled before the court so that we know that, notwithstanding anything that we think, there is justice.
Yes. It is very important to note that all of them were pointing the fingers at each other. So all of them said that the others had something to do with the death of Tyre Nichols. That is basis whether it be the state criminal charge, but especially the civil case, the wrongful death civil rights violation, because the violation of Tyre Nichols' civil rights led to his death. And the blood is on the hand of the Memphis Police Department. Right. And we're thankful to the jury for this first step of justice. Now you will hear from his Uncle Johnny.
First and foremost, I'd just like to thank you all for being here for our family. I thank the federal government. They really worked very hard.
This was
Tyre.
back in October.
And I'd like to thank God for watching over us and for our families. And, you know, like they said, they're all in prison. They're not getting out anytime soon, and it's not over. I'd just like to say, you know, let this be a message to all officers, you know, that, you know, you will reap what you sow.
That's right.
You know, I mean, you just can't go around hurting people and think that you're not going to be accountable for it. So let this be a message, because Tyre's death did not go in vain. And that's all I like to
Now
say.
you hear from his sister, Kiana, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, I don't know if I'm happy, but it's a bittersweet day. I will never get my little brother back, but to see those officers held accountable for what they did and put our family through did give us some hope for the future. And maybe this won't ever happen to another family in the future, but I just so thankful. I was smiling, saw them get taken away into custody, because part of that's just the thing they did with him. What they did to my brother was wrong, and to see them go into custody and be held accountable was anything and everything that my family could ask for.
Justice for Tyre Nichols.
Justice for Tyre Nichols.
We'd like to thank all the activists, all the state representatives, everybody, all the faith-based community, everybody who stood for justice, to say that Tyre deserved humanity, Tyre deserved his constitutional rights, and Tyre deserved to get home to his mother and father. Ms. Robon, would you like to say the
I
last
just
word?
want to say to all of you guys, thank you so much for covering the story the correct way. And I appreciate the love and everything that you guys have given our family, and to the communities of Memphis. Thank you for all the prayers and all the love. Just thank you so much. We appreciate it all.
Anything else, Kareem? Anything else, family?
Nope.
Justice for Tyre Nichols. Justice for Tyre Nichols. Justice for Tyre Nichols.
Attorney Ben
Justice for
Crump.
Tyre Nichols.
You heard from him, you heard from Attorney Ramanucci, you heard from Tyre's mother and father, Robon Wells and Rodney Wells, his uncle, his sister, many of them out there.
Shouldn't they be saying
should
they
be punished
got
most
justice
severely.
for him?
We know
Seeing
that
how all of them
Martin
said
and
justice
Haley and
was
those
served in
all
that
pointed the
moment?
fingers at each other.
We had to
And
change
not
it
only are they
up
going
once
to have
the
to answer
justice has
to
been served.
the judge when he sentences them, most importantly, they're going to have to answer to God. That's right.
Right. That's on you. You all wanted a guilty verdict on all counts.
We
Correct.
got, and that's what I was sitting there holding hands with Mr. Wells and Miss Wells, and when they heard a guilty conviction for each one of them, they thanked God right there as they were sitting in the courtroom. But then, when the judge said, U.S. Marshals, take them all into custody, Mr. Wells said, thank God, all of them going to jail for what they did to my boy.
Thank you.
Justice for Tyre.
Justice for Tyre.
Justice for Tyre.
Heard from, that was Attorney Ben Crump, who has been with the family since the very beginning. We also heard, as you said, from Darcy, from Tony Ramanucci, a defense attorney. He had some of the most poignant words, if you will. He said, today was monumental. This is justice for Tyre.
12 counts is where it started.
12 counts. And they got guilty verdicts on 6 of them. And the family said, you heard Robon Wells say it first. The mother of Tyre, Nichols, stepped to the microphone first out of that group and said, we are happy. We have guilty verdicts. And it was Rodney Wells who followed that up by saying, the U.S. Marshals are taking them into custody. What more could we ask for?
I believe it was Tyre's uncle who says you reap what you sow. You cannot go around and not be held accountable. Robon says she is elated, and this has been a long time coming, and the family together said justice for Tyre.
So again, it's very, as you continue to see the final charges and the verdict flash up on your screen, we roll through these 3 defendants. It's very important to point out that while, yes, there were not guilty verdicts on the unreasonable force charges and the deliberate indifference charges, the guilty verdicts in the obstruction of justice charges and conspiracy to obstruct justice charges each carry 20 years in prison as a maximum. So there are 2 of the 3 individuals that could be facing up to 40 years in prison. That notwithstanding, the state trial has yet to begun. That's where, if you will, not to take any gravity away from this 4-week federal trial, but that's where they will all stand trial on second-degree murder charges with a maximum sentence of 60 years, not to mention other charges that the state has filed in regards to this case.
We're going to go back out to Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. Again, she has been on top of the
If
story.
the feds could have
for the last
proven
19 days.
that they
Kayla, so much
committed
emotion
any
coming
type
from
of
Tyre
murder,
Nichols' family, but
they
also
would
his
have
attorneys
pushed
as well.
for it and charged them with it.
Yeah, you heard
That's
it
why
there
I
from
said the state
attorneys Ben Crump and Antonio Romanucci, as well as Rodney and Rovon Wells, the parents of Tyre Nichols, saying that although they weren't found guilty on all charges, they were thrilled that each person was found guilty of at least one charge. And right after that verdict came down, U.S. Marshals took each man into custody. So at this point, the question is, how much of a sentence will the judge give them? We know they were all found guilty of that obstruction of justice charge and conspiracy, and that carries a sentence of up to 20 years in federal prison. And of course, once the state trial happens next year, there could be additional time in state prison as well.
Yeah, Kayla, that was one of the things we were discussing as well. And I don't want to get too deep into the minutia, but when that state trial does begin, of course, everyone is going to be focused on the second-degree murder charges. But just like the federal trial, there are other charges in that case as well. This is going to be very significant.
Yeah, and again, the state charges also have to do with the cover-up that each former officer did that night. Now, we know that these same 3 defendants will be part of that state trial, as Emmett Martin and Desmond Mills already pleaded guilty, and that guilty plea will potentially carry over to the state case as well.
We know that these former officers are going to be sentenced, at least in this federal trial, at some point in February. At that point, that's when the state case begins. Again, we talked about second-degree murder, but they're also looking at aggravated assault, 2 charges of aggravated kidnapping, 2 charges of official misconduct, and 1 charge of official oppression as well.
And that's not to mention the civil lawsuit, which the burden of proof in a civil lawsuit is different than a criminal trial. So that third trial in federal court, which goes back to federal court, is going to look really a lot different than these 2 previous trials, as this one looks different than the state trial, which is coming up, as Kayla said, at the beginning of the year. So Kayla, I wanted to get your take on one more thing. Again, we talked about the fact that a lot of people really expected, I think the general public really expected to see more guilty verdicts. They expected those obstruction charges to come back with a guilty verdict. Benjamin Crump seemed jubilant with the fact that they did get 6 of the 12 charges. They did get guilty verdicts on 6 of the 12.
Well, Kayla, before you answer, I also feel that Tyre Nichols' parents, they felt like
much higher in a federal case, especially a criminal case like this one. So just wanted some guilty pleas could be sentenced to, don't know how that will point. They just wanted some form of accountability. You heard them say that word multiple times during the media scrum we just had, but they just wanted some form of accountability. So the fact that each person was found guilty of at least 1 count, that says a lot. They also implied the fact that that brings the tally up to all 5 who will be serving some sort of prison time in this case.
I also heard, when Ben Crump said, when Judge Norris made it very clear, U.S. Marshals take all defendants into custody.
Did we expect that? Kayla, did we expect them to be taken into custody immediately, or did we expect there to be an easement?
No, it's different from every courtroom. It's different from every judge. So when you do hear for a U.S. Marshal to immediately take someone into custody, it is a little surprising, especially considering that their sentencing isn't until January. So that's partially why the family said they felt a little bit of joy in this very gloomy situation. Of course, they can't get their son back. They can't get their brother back. But what they can do is know that 3 of the people found guilty of a charge that led up to Tyre Nichols' death, they are being held in custody for the time being.
Okay, that is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon reporting live at federal court. Of course, we're going to go back to Kayla shortly.
Absolutely. So the words of the day coming from the family of Tyre Nichols. Rovon Wells, happy with a guilty verdict. She said, thank God. Rodney Wells, elated, proud you're all going to jail today. Speaking of the 3 officers who were facing the charges in this federal trial. Of course, there were 5, but 2 had pled guilty and actually turned state's evidence and testified against the other 3. And Benjamin Crump, and that was really where I wanted Kayla to go, because one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand, and maybe I didn't have a full comprehension of the fact, is the burden of proof at the federal level is very different than it is at the state level, and what they're going to face in those murder charges here in Shelby County. Federal prosecutors really had a job before them to get to this level and to get guilty verdicts in 6 of the 12 charges.
They did. Again, 3 defendants, 3 former Memphis police officers, Justin Smith, Tadarius Bean, Demetrius Haley. They have all been found guilty of a charge, some more than one charge. Tadarius Bean, guilty on count 4, which was obstruction of justice. Demetrius Haley was found guilty on counts 3 and 4, which I believe was conspiracy to witness tamper and obstruction of justice. Demetrius Haley, again, found guilty. I take that back. Demetrius Haley found guilty on charges 3 and 4, but he was also found guilty on 2 lesser charges, deprivation of rights, but also causing bodily harm. And Justin Smith, facing 1 count, obstruction of justice. He was found not guilty on the first 3 counts.
And we have to remember, this has been just over a year and a half in the making, almost 2 years in the making. This all began January 7th. It was a Saturday night back in 2023. That's where officers stopped Tyre Nichols at a traffic stop, an initial traffic stop, as it was described by officers. He did stop. He seemed to comply, but then was pulled out of the car. He was pepper sprayed, and he ran away from that incident. He ran away from that scene. He ran from the officers down the block, only 2 blocks from his home. And here's where it ended.
He was so close. And in the video, we know that he was kicked, beaten, tased, pepper sprayed as well.
Now, this is the corner of Castlegate Lane and Bear Creek Cove. He was within shouting distance of his mother's house. This is a Skycop camera that captured these still frame pictures that you see. And one of the big arguments that the prosecution laid out, and you're probably going to hear this time and time again in the state trial, is that no one on the scene, none of the officers immediately rendered aid. After he was incapacitated and seemingly unconscious, none of those officers did anything to help. Of course, there are EMTs, fire department members who have also they've lost their jobs. They faced suspensions and then lost their jobs because it was determined by their employers, the city of Memphis, they did not render aid in a timely manner. And that's where that indifference charge seems to start to tie in. It was 3 days afterwards, after this beating, on Saturday, January 7th. January 10th, Tyre Nichols died of his wounds in the hospital.
Which were severe. They were very extreme. I believe that his mother also made it very clear that her son had swelling of the brain, kidney failure because of his injuries. They were extreme, to say the least.
He had heart injuries. He had internal injuries that are indescribable unless you were in a major car wreck. Of course, that led to you do have to give the Shelby County District Attorney's Office and the MPD credit for the fact they released all available video as quickly as they could. Pictures, still frame pictures. You saw the Skycop just a moment ago. We've seen body camera footage as you take a look at some of Tyre Nichols' photography work. He was known to be a photographer in the neighborhood.
Skateboarder.
All of that was laid out very, very quickly for the public to see. So you do have to give credit for that. But soon after that, the MPD Scorpion unit, which was charged with high-value crimes, they were soon disbanded.
We're talking about auto theft. We're talking about searching down gang members. We're talking about
high-value
drugs,
crimes.
High-value crimes. Right. And I believe it was Interim Police Chief C.J. Davis that said what he was pulled over initially for was a misdemeanor, not a high-value crime, not being a part of a gang, not for drugs, not auto theft, not for guns, but a misdemeanor. And this is where we are today.
And the officers testified in court that they were angry that night because they had been pepper sprayed themselves as part of this process.
Also that he tried to run.
And that he did flee police. His mother said time and time again that he was simply terrified and had no understanding of what was happening to him.
So while we wait for the sentencing, which will happen early next year, we also wait for the state charges that these officers will be facing as well.
I believe we still have Fox 13's Kayla Solomon. Nope, we do not. We've got Kayla down there. She's working on getting reaction. I would imagine she's waiting on prosecutors to come out and possibly defense attorneys. Actually, we do have Kayla. Kayla, is there any indication at all that you're going to hear from either A, the prosecution, or B, defense attorneys as well?
Yeah, at this point, it's unclear. We've been standing out here for about 20 minutes now, and we still have not seen any of the prosecutors come out. We also haven't seen any of the defense attorneys, but I will over here across the street, family of Tyre Nichols and some of the activists are still over there. There are supporters that came out here yelling justice for Tyre Nichols during this entire thing. Now, I want to tell you also that we heard from the family. We heard their thoughts on the verdict. We also heard everything that they felt. They said they were just happy that each defendant was found guilty of at least one charge, and they were immediately taken into custody. So again, we've heard from the family, we've heard from attorneys, in this case, the attorneys for the Nichols family rather. And at this point, we're just waiting to see if any of the defense attorneys will come out and speak, any of the prosecutors, either from the DOJ or from the local office here, the AUSA's office. So yeah, we're still waiting out here for them. And of course, once we do have that, we'll attempt to get comments from them because each of their clients were immediately taken into custody.
Kayla, you mentioned, actually, you showed us just a moment ago that small group of people who were across the street. Throughout this trial, I don't think we've seen many protesters. We haven't seen that many people on the street just speaking their voice about what's going on inside that building. Have you?
Yeah, there's actually been community activists in the courtroom every single day. I think out of respect for the family, they were deciding not really to speak publicly, but the entire time they've been here every day, sitting in the courtroom with the family. And every day we've seen them walk in with the family and leave. So they have been very present. But of course, they're leaving it up to the family to do the talking as well as the attorneys.
All right, very good.
That is Fox 13's Kayla Solomon reporting live. Of course, we're going to continue to talk to Kayla throughout our newscast
Yeah,
tonight.
stay on standby, Kayla, because as soon as those attorneys walk out, we would love to hear from, there are three sides to this case. There's the family, not three sides, but three facets, if you will, three angles. The family who we've heard from, the defense attorneys, it's going to be interesting to get their take. And of course, federal prosecutors, we thought initially they might be a little disappointed with this verdict, but maybe not. Getting 6 guilties out of 12 charges, according to Benjamin Crump, as he just said, that's actually a really good day in federal court, and that he feels justice was served for Tyre.
We definitely thought that some of the other counts, they were definitely going to find them guilty on, but they did not. But it was the reaction from Ben Crump, from Attorney Ramanucci, and even the family that was a little shocking. I just thought that they were going to be more upset, but they weren't. They were just happy that these officers were found guilty on something.
And, I think that Tony Ramanucci and Ben Crump probably prepped them for this because, they've been here, done this. And I would imagine, I'm not there, I haven't been privy to any of these conversations, but I would imagine that both Crump and Ramanucci said, hey, this is probably how it's going to go down. And if we get a guilty verdict on any of the 4 charges, we're really doing something special.
Especially being a federal case.
That's exactly because the bar is so high on a federal case. In fact, let's go to Benjamin Crump, because just a moment ago when he came out of the courthouse about 20 minutes ago, he did a pretty good job of explaining exactly how and why the family is pleased with this verdict.
This has been a long journey for our family. I'm actually in shock right now because I still can't believe all this stuff is going on. But we're happy that they all have been convicted and they have been arrested.
And that the jury found all of them in some way committed a crime, and that Tyre Nichols' death won't go unaccounted for.
We also heard from Tyre Nichols' sister, who was out there with the family today. This has to be somewhat of a relief for her. She said she was very close to Tyre Nichols, and she says for her, this looks like justice for her.
What they did to my brother was wrong, and to see them go into custody and be held accountable was anything and everything that my family could ask for.
Kenya Dixon.
So again, the family,
Pleased.
very pleased
at the guilty verdict.
with the fact that these individuals, again, were taken out of court, led away by U.S. Marshals in handcuffs, and they will immediately go into the federal system.
Be behind bars.
Of course, that sentencing, as Kayla has pointed out, Fox 13's Kayla Solomon, who's been knee-deep in this trial since the very beginning, explained that sentencing is yet to come. There will be 2 other dates for the other 2 individuals, the other 2 former officers who actually turned to state's evidence, if you will, and they testified against the 3 who were on trial here in this federal system. All of the sentencing are going to be separate, so that's yet to come. But up to 20 years on each count they were found guilty on.
The obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and then the 2 lesser charges, which were the excessive force and deliberate indifference, which I believe Demetrius Haley.
Right. And of course, keep in mind, and we pointed it out, but we have to keep reminding everyone, we have to keep reminding ourselves, this is just the first step out of 3 for all of these 5 officers. Up next is this state trial. That's going to begin at the beginning of the year. The state trial is where you're going to get a solid 530. The second charges, along with more obstruction charges. So that second-degree murder charge carries a maximum of 60 years in prison, and all 5 are going to face that. So there's still a lot at play here. We're far from done.
There was so much reaction in our newsroom, and Kayla said there was reaction even on the street. We're going to turn to Fox 13's Jack Bilyeu, who's also down there.
So, yeah. The feds had 2 charges on there that could have got those officers life, some indifferences, whatever the hell it was. It wasn't murder, but it was 2 charges that they hit all of them with that wasn't murder, but it carried life sentences. The state and they couldn't get that proven. The feds decided not to even charge for murder. They used some other shit that'll get your life though. And the state came and I don't know. I said I felt it, but I also was aware that they ain't just walk away scot-free. They all got to do some fed time. And it's not gonna be like a year or 2. As y'all heard, one of the ones that said they helping, one of the ones that took a guilty plea and testified on their behalf, He's still facing 45 damn years. So there's that. They all gonna sit down for a nice little minute. Now, I don't know if they've still were in jail from the time from this was October 3rd. So I don't know if they had been in jail from October 3rd through this state trial, but I think they probably were. So even though they've been out, they're still in federal custody waiting to be sentenced. Justice. But yeah, I did this because I didn't think a lot of people remembered this in the family's actual reaction. So the family, they haven't had any statements out where they're shocked and they're upset about what went on at the state level, because they had already got federal convictions, and yeah, it trumps the state. So even if they would have gotten out of, just say they got convicted of something in the state system, they would have had to serve their fed time first. Then when they got done with their fed time, they would be transferred to a state prison. That's all. And actually, 2 of them are going to have to serve some state time. Well, no, one of them is because he pled guilty. The other one has to be tried. But he may be found guilty of second degree. I'm sure he has the same 7 charges as them, but they said he was more culpable. So yeah, he still may get something from the state, but it doesn't matter if they get anything from the state because they all facing double digits in the feds. That's all I got. To the next episode, we out. Never been a hoe, I stay on go, so what the business? Nigga talking reckless, shoot this bitch ass with the quickness. Now he bleeding, sorry, begging, asking for forgiveness. Bow, 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 limp biscuit. All my niggas wildin', they done labeled us a misfit. Wake up every morning, 2 or 3, 5 in the tidbit. Oh shit, didn't nobody come to see you old. It's some focus, shoot 100 shots, no reloaded. Master of the game, you would think I'm into coded. Memphis niggas spit this pippin', mackin' like I'm golden. Ho, with my money, you gon' turn me to the old me. Say hi, first class flight, I'm in the nosebleed. Hop it, cook it, whip it, ship it till you count the proceeds. OG, I've been moving pack niggas since 03. Low key, niggas hating, but they don't want no beef. State gang, true sippers, bitch, I bet we don't eat. Get jammed, get a lawyer, make it bunny, don't speak. Pour up, I need some more. A nigga had a long week. Shout out to my plug, he showed me love, he out in Long Beach. I'm too geek, walking by myself but left with 2 freaks. Ooh wee, nothing in they mouth and on they booty. Austin Power swag, yeah baby, this is groovy. You can call me Money Boy or you can call me Nudie. Hood niggas, churches, chicken, let me get a 2-piece. Top down, 2-seater, let me feel the 2 breathe. Gotta hold it steady, chopper, kick it back like Bruce Lee. Lately I've been in the zone, I guess I'm in my 2-3. Don't call my phone for nothing less than a QP. Feeling like the Migos, cause my bitch is bad and bougie. All my haters love me, all these bitches just some groupies. Came a long way, I like to introduce the new me. Standing on business like I'm king or like I'm Drewski. Call me Ron Island cause I like my love for choosy. When we link it's a movie, she bustin' like a Uzi. I love the way she do me, I beat it up like Uzi. She dancing just like Suki. Call me Ron Island cause I love my love for choosy. When we link it's a movie, she bustin' like a Uzi. I love the way she do me, I beat it up like Uzi. She dancing just like Suki. I never been a hoe, I stay on go, so what the business? Niggas talking reckless, shoot his bitch ass with the quickness. Name pleading, sorry, begging, asking for forgiveness. Bow, 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 limp biscuit. Never been a hoe, I stay on go, so what the business? Nigga talking reckless, shoot his bitch ass with the quickness. Name pleading, sorry, begging, asking for forgiveness. Bow, 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 limp biscuit.